You're about to discover something that will completely shatter everything you think you know about yourself. What if I told you that every decision you've ever made, every relationship you've chosen, every pattern you keep repeating wasn't actually your choice at all? What if there's an invisible puppet master inside your mind, pulling strings you can't even see, controlling your life from the shadows? This isn't some conspiracy theory. This is the terrifying reality of human psychology. And the man who exposed this hidden truth changed everything we thought we knew about the human mind. His name was Carl Jung, and what he discovered about the dark forces lurking in your unconscious will make you question everything. Right now, as you're watching this, there are ancient forces at work inside your head, primordial patterns that have been shaping human behavior for thousands of years. They're making you fall for the same type of person over and over again. They're sabotaging your success right when you're about to break through. They're whispering lies that keep you small, scared, and stuck. But here's what's even more disturbing. The part of you that you hate most, the part you try to hide from everyone, the part you're ashamed of. That's actually the key to everything you've ever wanted. Your darkest impulses, your most shameful thoughts, your deepest fears, they're not your enemy. They're your greatest untapped power source. And Jung figured out how to harness it. If you're tired of feeling like you're living someone else's life, if you're sick of repeating the same self-destructive patterns, if you want to finally understand why you do the things you do, then smash that subscribe button right now. Because what I'm about to show you isn't just psychology. It's a roadmap to your authentic self. It's the difference between living as a puppet and becoming the puppet master. Let me ask you something. Have you ever looked in the mirror and felt like you were staring at a stranger? Have you ever caught yourself saying or doing something and thought, "That's not who I am"? Have you ever felt like there's this whole other person living inside you, someone you've never met but who seems to be running the show? Welcome to your shadow. Welcome to your collective unconscious. Welcome to the archetypal forces that have been pulling your strings since the day you were born. Most people live their entire lives without ever meeting their real selves. They wear masks, play roles, follow scripts written by their parents, their culture, their fears. They think they're making conscious choices, but they're actually just dancing to music they can't hear, following patterns they don't understand. Carl Jung saw through all of that. He looked into the human psyche and found something that made Freud himself uncomfortable. While Freud was obsessed with sex and childhood trauma, Jung discovered something far more profound and far more terrifying. He found that we're not just individuals struggling with our personal problems. We're connected to something ancient, something collective, something that transcends our individual existence. He called it the collective unconscious. And once you understand what that means, you'll never look at yourself the same way again. Picture your mind like an iceberg. Everything you're conscious of, your thoughts, your memories, your personality, that's just the tip floating above water. But beneath the surface, there's this massive underwater structure. And here's the kicker, that underwater part isn't just yours. It's shared by every human being who has ever lived. It's filled with what Jung called archetypes. These are universal patterns, ancient blueprints that shape how we think, feel, and behave. The hero's journey, the wise old man, the great mother, the trickster, the lover, the destroyer. These aren't just stories we tell. They're psychological forces that live inside you right now, influencing every decision you make. You know that feeling when you watch a movie and you're completely absorbed, even though you've seen the same story 1,000 times. That's your archetypes responding. You know that attraction you feel to certain people that you can't explain rationally. That's your anima or animus calling out. You know that rage that sometimes explodes out of nowhere. That's your shadow demanding attention. But here's what most people don't realize. These forces don't just influence you. When you're unconscious of them, they possess you. They take over. They make your decisions for you. And you think it's your free will. Jung studied thousands of patients, analyzed countless dreams, explored myths and religions from every culture, and what he found was shocking. The same symbols, the same patterns, the same archetypal figures appeared everywhere. In dreams, in fairy tales, in religious texts, in the fantasies of people who had never met each other. This wasn't coincidence. This was proof that there's a deeper layer of mind that connects all of humanity, a psychic substrate that contains the wisdom and the madness of our entire species, and you have access to it, right now. It's speaking to you through your dreams, your intuitions, your sudden insights, your irrational fears. The question is, are you listening? Most people aren't. Most people are so caught up in the surface level of life, so distracted by social media, work, relationships, that they never tune into the deeper frequency. They never learn the language of symbols. They never meet their archetypes. They never confront their shadow. And that's why they stay stuck. That's why they repeat the same patterns. That's why they feel empty despite having everything they thought they wanted. Because you can't heal what you won't acknowledge. You can't integrate what you won't face. You can't become whole when you're only willing to accept half of yourself. Jung didn't just discover these forces. He mapped them. He showed us how to work with them instead of being enslaved by them. He created a process he called individuation, the journey of becoming who you really are beneath all the masks and conditioning. But I'm warning you right now. This isn't some feel-good self-help journey. This is the most challenging work you'll ever do, because it requires you to look at the parts of yourself you've spent your whole life running from. It requires you to meet your shadow. Have you ever exploded with rage and surprised yourself with the intensity? Have you ever felt jealous of someone and then felt guilty for feeling jealous? Have you ever had thoughts that made you question what kind of person you really are? Congratulations, you've just met your shadow, the part of your personality that you've rejected, repressed, and tried to pretend doesn't exist. Here's the brutal truth that Jung discovered. Every quality you deny in yourself doesn't disappear. It goes underground. It becomes part of your unconscious shadow, and from there it runs your life in ways you can't even imagine. The shadow is everything you learned was unacceptable. Your anger, your selfishness, your neediness, your arrogance, your sexuality, your aggression, your vulnerability, whatever your family, your religion, your culture told you was bad, wrong, or shameful that became shadow material. But here's what they didn't tell you. Your shadow isn't just negative. It's also where your power lives. It's where your creativity lives. It's where your passion lives. It's where your authentic self lives. When you reject your shadow, you don't just reject the bad parts. You reject vitality itself. You become a sanitized, socially acceptable version of yourself. You become what Jung called a persona, a mask designed to fit in and get approval. And that's why you feel empty. That's why you feel like something's missing. That's why you feel like you're living someone else's life. Because you are. The shadow doesn't just stay hidden. It projects itself onto other people. You start seeing in others what you can't accept in yourself. You judge them for the very things you're unconsciously doing. You attract people who act out your repressed impulses. You create drama and conflict because your shadow is trying to get your attention. Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Every person who triggers you is showing you something about your own shadow. Every quality you hate in others is pointing to something you've rejected in yourself. But here's the revolutionary part. Jung didn't say you should eliminate your shadow. He said you should integrate it, make it conscious, own it. Work with it instead of against it. Because your shadow contains not just your destructive impulses, but your creative impulses, your courage, your authentic power, your ability to say no, your ability to stand up for yourself, your passion, your fire. The people who seem most alive, most authentic, most powerful, they've done shadow work. They've faced their darkness and integrated it. They've stopped pretending to be perfect and started being real. This integration process is what Jung called individuation. It's the journey from being a fragmented collection of personas and projections to becoming a whole, integrated human being. But individuation isn't comfortable. It's not a weekend workshop or a quick fix. It's a lifelong process of becoming conscious. It's death and rebirth, over and over again. It's letting go of who you thought you were to discover who you actually are. Most people avoid this process. They'd rather stay unconscious, stay comfortable, stay small. They'd rather blame others for their problems than take responsibility for their own healing. They'd rather maintain their illusions than face their truth. But for those brave enough to take the journey, something magical happens. They stop being victims of unconscious forces. They start becoming conscious creators of their own experience. They stop attracting the same patterns and start creating new possibilities. The first step in individuation is recognizing that you have a shadow. The second step is starting to observe it without judgment. When you feel triggered, instead of reacting, you pause and ask, what is this showing me about myself? When you judge someone harshly, you ask, how am I doing this same thing? When you feel shame or guilt, you ask, what part of me am I rejecting? This isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. It's about reclaiming all the parts of yourself that you've disowned. It's about stopping the exhausting process of maintaining a false self and starting the liberating process of being authentic. But consciousness doesn't just come through thinking. Jung discovered that the psyche speaks to us in a language older than words. It speaks in symbols, images, and stories. It speaks through our dreams. While most people dismiss dreams as random brain noise, Jung saw them as direct communication from the unconscious. Every dream is a message. Every symbol has meaning. Every narrative is trying to restore balance to your psyche. Dreams show you what you're not seeing in waking life. They reveal your unconscious conflicts, your repressed desires, your hidden potentials. They show you your shadow, your anima or animus, your archetypal patterns. They guide you toward integration and wholeness. But dreams speak in the language of symbols, not literal facts. A dream about your house burning down isn't predicting a fire. It's showing you that some structure in your psyche needs to be transformed. A dream about being chased isn't about physical danger. It's about running from some aspect of yourself. Jung spent decades learning to decode this symbolic language. He found that certain symbols appear across cultures and throughout history because they represent archetypal patterns in the collective unconscious. Water represents the unconscious itself. Fire represents transformation. Animals represent instinctual energies. Death represents endings and new beginnings. When you start paying attention to your dreams, when you start recording them and reflecting on their symbolic meaning, you open a direct line of communication with your unconscious. You start receiving guidance that your rational mind could never provide. Your dreams will show you your patterns before you're conscious of them. They'll warn you about relationships that aren't right for you. They'll reveal talents and potentials you didn't know you had. They'll guide you through major life transitions. But you have to learn their language. You have to approach them with respect and curiosity rather than dismissal. You have to remember that the unconscious is trying to help you, even when its messages seem confusing or frightening. This symbolic language isn't limited to dreams. It appears in the stories that move us, the movies that captivate us, the art that speaks to our souls. When you're deeply affected by a piece of fiction, it's because it's activating archetypal patterns in your psyche. The hero's journey that appears in every great story isn't just a narrative structure. It's a map of psychological development. The hero starts in the ordinary world, receives a call to adventure, faces trials and tribulations, confronts the shadow, and returns transformed. This is the individuation process encoded in story form. The characters in these stories aren't just entertainment. They're aspects of your own psyche. The wise mentor represents your inner wisdom. The villain represents your shadow. The love interest represents your anima or animus. The journey they take is the journey you need to take. Understanding this symbolic language transforms how you see everything. Suddenly, your life becomes meaningful in a completely different way. You start seeing the archetypal patterns playing out in your relationships, your career, your personal development. You start recognizing when you're playing the victim, the hero, the rebel, the caregiver. And most importantly, you start making these patterns conscious. Instead of being unconsciously driven by archetypal forces, you start working with them intentionally. You start becoming the author of your own story instead of just a character in someone else's narrative. But this consciousness comes with responsibility. Once you see these patterns, you can't unsee them. Once you understand how your psyche works, you can't go back to unconscious living. You have to choose, moment by moment, whether you're going to be driven by unconscious forces or guided by conscious awareness. This is why Jung's work is more relevant today than ever. We live in a world that's becoming increasingly unconscious. We're bombarded with distractions that pull us away from inner awareness. We're encouraged to live on the surface, to consume rather than reflect, to react rather than respond. Social media feeds our personas while starving our souls. Consumer culture promises happiness through external acquisitions while ignoring inner emptiness. Self-help culture offers quick fixes while avoiding the deep work of integration. The result is a collective crisis of meaning. Depression and anxiety rates are skyrocketing. Addiction is epidemic. Relationships are becoming more superficial and disposable. People have more opportunities than ever before, but they feel more lost than ever before. This is exactly what Jung predicted. He saw that modern civilization was creating a split between consciousness and the unconscious, between persona and shadow, between head and heart. He warned that this split would lead to psychological fragmentation and spiritual emptiness. But he also offered a solution, not through going backwards to some imagined golden age, but through going deeper into consciousness, through facing our shadows instead of projecting them onto others, through learning the language of symbols instead of living only on the surface, through individuating instead of conforming. The path Jung outlined isn't easy. It requires courage to face your darkness. It requires patience to decode your dreams. It requires honesty to see your patterns. It requires responsibility to own your projections. It requires faith to trust your inner wisdom. But for those willing to take this path, the rewards are extraordinary. You stop being a victim of unconscious forces and become a conscious creator. You stop seeking validation from others and find validation from within. You stop being driven by fear and start being guided by love. You stop living someone else's life and start living your own. You discover that you're not broken, just unconscious. You're not weak, just fragmented. You're not hopeless, just disconnected from your deeper self. Jung called this the transcendent function, the ability to hold the tension between opposites until a new synthesis emerges. Light and dark, masculine and feminine, rational and intuitive, individual and collective. When you can embrace all of these aspects of yourself, you become whole. This wholeness isn't perfection, it's integration. It's the ability to be fully human with all the contradictions and complexities that entails. It's the courage to be authentic instead of acceptable. It's the wisdom to know yourself instead of pretending to be someone else. And here's the beautiful paradox. The more you individuate, the more you become yourself, the more you contribute to the collective. Because when you're no longer projecting your unconscious content onto the world, you can see clearly. When you're no longer driven by compulsions, you can respond consciously. When you're no longer seeking external validation, you can give authentic service. The world needs people who have done this work. The world needs people who know their shadows and can work with them consciously. The world needs people who can read the symbolic language of the psyche and understand what's really happening beneath the surface of events. The world needs people who have individuated, but it starts with you. It starts with your willingness to look in the mirror and see not just who you want to be, but who you actually are. It starts with your courage to face your shadow, to listen to your dreams, to recognize your patterns, to take responsibility for your projections. It starts with the recognition that you're not just an isolated individual struggling with personal problems. You're part of something larger, something archetypal, something meaningful. Your journey matters not just for you, but for the collective healing of our species. Jung believed that individual consciousness and collective consciousness are intimately connected. When you do your own psychological work, you contribute to the evolution of human consciousness itself. When you face your shadow, you make it easier for others to face theirs. When you individuate, you give others permission to do the same. This isn't just personal development. This is conscious evolution. This is the next step in human development. This is how we heal the split between consciousness and the unconscious, between individual and collective, between human and nature. But it requires courage. The courage to be disliked. The courage to be misunderstood. The courage to be authentic instead of acceptable. The courage to face your darkness and integrate it instead of projecting it onto others. Are you ready for that kind of courage? Are you ready to stop living on the surface and dive into the depths of your psyche? Are you ready to stop being a character in someone else's story and become the author of your own? Jung said that the meeting with oneself is, at first, the meeting with one's shadow. It's not comfortable. It's not pretty. It's not what you expected, but it's real. And in a world full of artificiality, reality is the most precious thing you can find. Your shadow is waiting, your unconscious is calling, your dreams are speaking, your authentic self is ready to emerge. The question is, are you ready to listen? The path is here. The map has been drawn. Jung did the hard work of exploring the unconscious territory and bringing back the knowledge we need. But you have to take the journey yourself. No one can do it for you. No guru, no therapist, no self-help book can give you what you can only find within yourself. But you don't have to do it alone. Jung's work provides the framework. Your dreams provide the guidance. Your shadow provides the energy. Your authentic self provides the direction. And every step you take toward consciousness, every pattern you make conscious, every projection you withdraw, every dream you remember, every shadow aspect you integrate, you become more whole, more real, more alive. This is the most important work you'll ever do. Not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Not because it's comfortable, but because it's authentic. Not because it's safe, but because it's real. Your unconscious is already speaking to you. It's been speaking to you your whole life. In your dreams, your symptoms, your relationships, your patterns, your attractions, your repulsions. The question isn't whether it's communicating. The question is whether you're ready to listen. If this resonates with you, if something inside you recognizes the truth in these words, then you're ready to begin. Leave a comment below and tell me which part hit you the hardest. Which shadow aspect are you ready to face? Which pattern are you tired of repeating? Which dream have you been ignoring? Just putting it into words begins the process of making it conscious. Just acknowledging it starts the integration. Just seeing it clearly reduces its power over you. This is your invitation to step off the surface and dive deep. To stop living unconsciously and start living consciously. To stop being driven by forces you don't understand and start being guided by wisdom you didn't know you had. Your authentic self is waiting. Your real life is waiting. Your conscious existence is waiting. The only question is, are you ready to meet yourself?